Operation Joint Forge. Following the bloodshed of the Bosnian War and the signing of the Dayton Peace Accords in 1995, NATO took on one of its most enduring and complex missions, maintaining peace in a divided country still reeling from genocide, displacement, and ethnic hatred. While initial stabilization came under Operation Joint Endeavor and was continued through Joint Guard, by June 1998, NATO transitioned to a new phase, Operation Joint Forge. This wasn't a mission born out of emergency, but necessity. Bosnia and Herzegovina needed long-term stability. Ethnic tensions between Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs still simmered beneath the surface. NATO's task was clear: deter violence, support reconstruction, and ensure that the terms of the Dayton Agreement were upheld. Operation Joint Forge became NATO's instrument to shape and sustain peace through military presence, political cooperation, and unrelenting vigilance. Under Joint Forge, NATO led the Stabilization Force, or SFOR, a robust military presence that operated across the entire country. At its peak, SFOR involved over 20,000 troops from NATO member states and partner nations. They secured roads, protected infrastructure, patrolled former front lines, and monitored demilitarized zones. Their presence wasn't just strategic, it was psychological. For civilians who had lived through massacres and sieges, seeing NATO soldiers on patrol brought a sense of safety. For those contemplating a return to violence, it was a warning. Joint Forge was not only about boots on the ground. It was a coordination masterpiece involving civil-military cooperation. NATO troops worked closely with the Office of the High Representative, the OSCE, and countless NGOs to support rebuilding efforts. Roads, bridges, and homes were reconstructed under NATO protection. Local police forces were vetted and retrained. Elections were supervised. Armed factions that once ruled towns through fear were disarmed, and their influence eroded. A major component of the mission was fostering integration within the armed forces of Bosnia and Herzegovina. NATO advisors helped merge the once warring military factions into a single, professional, state-controlled defense force. Training programs emphasized democratic control, respect for human rights, and interoperability with NATO standards. The process was slow, often frustrating, but over time it sowed the seeds of trust and unity. Joint Forge also engaged in intelligence-led operations, targeting war criminals and extremists. NATO troops arrested individuals indicted by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, including former commanders accused of ethnic cleansing. These arrests, while controversial and sometimes dangerous, demonstrated that justice would not be forgotten, and that NATO's commitment extended beyond the battlefield. By the early 2000s, as Bosnia stabilized and EU institutions took on more responsibility, NATO began reducing its footprint. In December 2004, Operation Joint Forge officially ended, and the European Union Force, EUFOR, took over under Operation Althea. But the legacy of Joint Forge remained. It was the operation that bridged post-war desperation and fragile peace. Operation Joint Forge proved that peace is not an event, it's a process. It requires patience, presence, and persistent effort. NATO didn't just stop a war, it built the scaffolding for a new future. In a land where neighbors had once turned on each other with deadly force, Joint Forge helped create space for dialogue, reconstruction, and, slowly, reconciliation. It was not glamorous. It wasn't headline news, but it was vital. It was NATO doing what it had never done before, building peace one patrol, one handshake, one restored village at a time.